Bod, going local here. Insider Talk, Sunday, 12 to 1, at Rodney Boyd. Yeah, so much has been going on the national front that things are happening at Jefferson City we might not be really up to speed about. What's going on, buddy?
Well, I mean, there's a lot going on. I mean, there is, Jamie, there's been an effort underway. We haven't talked much about it, but I think it's a good and a strong effort to bring some new innovation to our state. There's a bill that will authorize the state to regulate the Ubers and the Lyfts and the traffic companies so that they can come in and operate under one sort of set of rules, one framework. That bill got bottled up in some issues in the Senate. It passed the House, but it's in the Senate this week, and you're going to hear a lot about it. You're going to hear a lot of people saying that if this bill passes and it gets to the governor, there's going to be a lot more activity in tech transportation network companies looking to come to Missouri. The biggest one that everybody knows is Uber, and then there's Lyft. But there's about 10 other companies that are talking about coming to Missouri and creating this framework. So that's one of those things that doesn't get a lot of attention, but it will add a new dimension, I think, of economic opportunity in the state if these companies really get robust and engaged in creating economic opportunity. But then there's just a whole bunch of other things. We're in our last, Jamie, you were there first week of session. We're heading in our last 5 weeks. That's not a lot of time. There's still a lot to get done. The biggest issue on the plate for the legislators, for us as Missourians, is finishing the budget. The House has passed the budget to the Senate, so there's a lot of back and forth about what we do with some of the shortfalls in Jeff City. And really, we had a good conversation yesterday with one of the new senators about the role of state government, taxes, and what reforms need to happen. So there's still a lot to do on the budget that will impact everybody who lives in Missouri, whether you like it or not.
There are 10 other companies that are like Uber and Lyft that are 10 other ones?
At least, and we can go through the list because some of them are looking at Missouri very interestingly now. And that's why this legislation, I think, it sends an interesting message. There are companies, Fasten, Fair, Anywhere Ride.
Love it.
Scoop Me. These are all companies that have said, if Missouri passes this legislation and opens themselves up for our industry, we're coming. And I think that's something that is lost on people when we get stuck in the one-dimensional conversation about
right.
Uber. They're the biggest, but they ain't the only one. And as you travel the country and as you see other companies reaching out, Wings, some funny names, but the bottom line is these companies are saying, if Missouri passes this bill, we're going to come and operate. We're going to create economic opportunities in a state that we feel is welcoming to our industry. So
yeah.
That's one of the things I think is encouraging.
Hey, by the way, too, one of the issues, and this is kind of creeping up on people, is the prevailing wage issue.
Yeah.
And the people who want to keep it are very, very active and have fought pretty hard. There was one indication early on from you that maybe this thing would never actually come to the table for a vote, but apparently it is or it is not, the issue of prevailing. Can you explain to people really quickly what that is?
So the prevailing wage is a requirement that on government projects there be a wage higher than the county average wage that would be paid by the governmental entities for work on certain projects. It's the prevailing wage. Some people in different pockets of the state hate it, quite honestly. They just want to see it go away. They want the market to literally determine it. Others say no. The contractors that pay that wage bring a certain skill set. They provide a certain training for the workers on those projects, which increases efficiency, ultimately lowers costs, and the prevailing wage is a good tool for a trained workforce. It's all a part of the conversation about worker and labor reform. So you had three pillars, Jamie. You had right to work, paycheck protection, and prevailing wage. What seemed like the trend was at the beginning of session was, as happened, focus on right to work, get that passed, get that signed into law. That left the other two issues, paycheck protection and prevailing wage. The difference between the first two is there seems to be a unanimity with Republicans for the most part. There are some exceptions, but unanimity that right to work must happen, paycheck protection should happen. Where it gets a little bit more muddled is prevailing wage. There are some conservative contracting groups, there's some conservative Republican voting folks that matter that don't necessarily want to repeal the prevailing wage. So the reason that one seems to have a higher hurdle to get over or a higher burden is because there's not unanimity on it.
Yeah.
There are people that are lobbying who have Republican credentials and support Republican candidates to keep the prevailing wage. just as passionately as there are people on the other side
Yeah.
saying we should.
Well, and before you get away, though, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that there are people who are believing that if you get rid of prevailing wage, suddenly you have a bunch of companies that come up, like, for instance, from Texas or whatever, and just simply lowball and get these government contracts and then suddenly just take the money back to Texas, which of course is a free market. So that's just the way it goes. But I also understand those who talk about the dangers of that. I mean, we already, and I think from a lot of standpoint of some of these Republicans, it's like, okay, we did the right to work thing, we're doing the paycheck protection thing. There's no way we can get away with this and still get unions behind us in the future. So I understand that. So it should be pretty. So when's this going to come to a head, Rod?
It will only come to a head when the leadership in the Senate brings it up on the floor. There's an anticipation that there will be a run at this. There will be an effort to get this up on the floor, but exactly when, we don't know. I can tell you this, it has to happen before May 13th, so within the next 5 weeks, if it's going to happen, it's going to have to come up on the Senate floor. That's where the fight will be.
All right, Rodney Boyd, and thanks. You're going to be on TV with me today?